Yeah, I know we were kind of talking about, well, first of all, hi, I'm Luna. I was just, I was thinking first, I know we were talking about it a little bit, but I was thinking everybody could introduce themselves so that on the panel and give a little bit like a little summary of their time abroad or their program, and then I'll open it up to questions to everybody. So we can start. Like I said, I'm Luna. I've studied abroad in two different programs. I went to Thailand for 2 weeks and was at Roong Aroon, which is a Buddhist, pre-K through 12 Buddhist school, just outside of Bangkok, I think. And it was a really good experience. That was in summer of 2023, I think. And that was really cool. I got to see holistic ed and like Buddhist practices in the classroom, which I don't really get to see here in Oregon. So that was really cool, as well as like getting experience. And then this last summer, I was in Gwangju, South Korea, for about a month, doing like classes and stuff. And that was really cool. It was a lot of cultural excursions. We went on about 2 or 3 a week, both like more like fun stuff like art museums and then or like art museums, camping, going out to dinner, that kind of stuff. And then we also had like some historical things, which was really cool. And I'm not a big historical person, but I really enjoyed that.
I guess I'll go because my mic is already open. My name's Cassie Woods. This was my first time out of the country going to Korea. And so I was in Gwangju with Luna with Chonnam National University, their international summer session. It was 4 weeks. They took us to a couple of different of the towns and cities, and we did a lot of museums, a lot of walking. It was fun. We tried things that I don't think we would have did if we were just tourists and like visiting. So they did a really good job of like immersing you in Korean culture so you can really understand everything from like food. And then even taking classes there was interesting. Um, I wound up having my American professor there because she went to Chonnam National University when she was in school, and so that was pretty cool. And so from there, went loved doing Chonnam National University. I liked the exposure that I got. We went to like the palaces and stuff like that in Seoul. We did a cruise in Yuso. Um, we went and then independently we had went to Mokpo. Really enjoyed that. And then from there, I went to Busan Global Village, and I spent 3 weeks there. And I would in the Global Village they had kids is for their summer school program, and the kids would stay there a week. And it was the age range was from first grade until I believe like 16. And so you had a schedule, you work with the kids. It was really interesting to see because I work at a American high school here. It was really interesting to see the difference in how they approach teaching English as a second, well, as a foreign language there, but as opposed to us teaching it as a second language. That was interesting. I got to see is it Hyundai Temple? And I got to really sightsee Busan while I was on the off days that I had at the school, and that was really fun. So all in all, I really liked South Korea, and it really gave me a difference, especially on the Busan Global Village, comparing how we approach teaching a second language, opposed to the American way of doing things, and then the international.
I can go ahead and hop on and go next. Hi, my name is Kelsie. Pronouns are she, her, and I did a study abroad through SOU, um, for part of like my like holistic education there in the ed program. We went to Dingle, Ireland, which is kind of on the like southern western part of Ireland, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It is anything that you think of or imagine or see in movies or photos of it is picture perfect exactly what it looks like. Um, Anyways, we went there specifically with a holistic focus, and we were learning about John Moriarty, who is an Irish writer and philosopher, and particularly in the area of nature and our connection, or the connection that nature has, or the disconnect that we have with nature and our own soul. So that really kind of tied in with our like whole child mindset, social emotional learning, um, and nature and play-based education. There's a lot of overlap and connection there. And so that was kind of our primary focus, as well as just being able to experience living in a different culture and what the education system looked like in another country. So we didn't have as much experience. We more were the students there to learn rather than there to teach. Um, Outside of that, I have been a part of a volunteer program before where I actually went to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, which is like a southern area of Vietnam, and I taught English as a second language there for a couple weeks and had a couple courses myself. By a couple courses, I mean there was a couple days of crash course language. We had meal classes where we got to like make like everyday meals, and we had 2 incredible weeks of exploring the country. When I was in Ireland, we got as far inland as Killarney, so we kind of got to see a little bit of like a bigger city, and then we were mainly just kind of focused in on the coast area, um, really focusing in on that like holistic part to education that we wanted to kind of learn and bring back with us a little bit.
All right, I'll go. Hi, my name is Caitlyn. I use she, her pronouns. So I graduated SOU in the summer of 2023. I ended up extending a term to study abroad in Korea. I was in Jukjeong, which is about an hour south of Seoul at Dankook University. My program was 7 weeks. I spent the first half of it teaching conversational English to other college students, and then I spent the other half taking classes and also doing cultural experiences. I am not an English or teaching major. I majored in criminal justice and psychology. Um, but I've always liked teaching and learning, so that's why I participated in the program. And I fell in love with Korea, and I did research on how to come back, and I found the EPIK English program in Korea government program, and I just thought I'd apply, and I ended up getting in. And so now I'm currently coming up on my 1 year teaching English in Korea at an elementary school. I'm in Gyeonggi-do, which is the province that surrounds Seoul. It goes all the way up to the DMZ and kind of all the way south of Seoul. I'm in a small village, so it's definitely very similar to Ashland, very slower lifestyle. But it's been amazing. I've had different cultural experiences. I live life a little bit differently now because I work here, I live here. I'm not just here temporarily. Yeah, that's kind of me.
Thank you guys for all sharing. I've heard briefly of all of your programs, but besides Cassie's, I didn't really know much about them because I haven't been on any of the others. So I'm really glad to hear about that. And thank you guys for being here. So I'm gonna open it up to other people who are like just joining us, if they have questions, and if not, I have a list of questions prepared. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
I happen to know that there's a few people on this call who might currently be overseas or have had experiences living or teaching or being overseas, and I'm just wondering if you all might want to briefly just speak to who you are and maybe where you've been. It could be interesting for all of us to hear. Tamara, Paul.
Okay, I'll go. It's great to hear your stories, and I'm very curious. I'd love to hear more. So, my name is Paul Friedman. I'm the founding head director of a school on Orcas Island, Washington, which in some ways is like a foreign country, in many ways, actually. But we've been here for 24 plus years. I'm also the senior editor for the Holistic Education Review journal publishing emerging scholarship and established scholars and their research in holistic education. We love to publish stories, so if you feel like writing, we'd love to encourage you to submit a manuscript or a draft or even an abstract. Recently, I got my own doctoral degree after spending a year traveling the world and immersing myself in various school cultures and particularly studying holistic leadership within holistic schools. Roong Aroon was one of the schools I spent time at. And other extraordinary places. I guess, I don't know, I have so many questions as usual, but I guess I would say I know it's challenging to travel, and I know it's lovely that SOU or other universities are giving students these opportunities to get out of the campus in which we're often cloistered and have different experiences. But I also know it takes tremendous intention and effort and expense to make those travel experiences happen at all, and then to be efficacious to really help your learning in meaningful ways takes a lot of intention. So I just want to congratulate you for making that effort and finding these places. Other than Roong Aroon, I don't know by name of the schools that you guys have visited. And I'd be super curious to know more if you have traveled and spent time in these schools as part of a program in holistic education. I wonder what aspects of where you were felt holistic, where the pedagogy that you've studied was embodied and where it wasn't, and what opportunities still exist for deepening holistic practices in the schools that you've seen, whether domestic or international. If anyone feels like chatting about that, and then let's keep talking.
So I do have a question. When you talk about holistic education, as I stated before, I'm like from the southern part of the United States, and American education is probably a bit different than everybody else. And this is my first time hearing about holistic education, and we probably use other words in education to kind of convey that meaning, but to actually give it holistic, because I think a lot of times we look at holistic, especially in the medicine world, it's kind of like, taboo or a no-no. So could you go into deeper detail of what holistic education would look like, and then how it would look like on different, like elementary, middle, or high school, if you don't mind?
I certainly don't mind, but I also don't want to hijack the meeting because that could easily take us the rest of the hour and then several weeks more. But I guess I would say, so in your study of education, if you came across progressive education, Deweyan progressive education, that's heading towards holistic. So holistic education, I guess, includes the idea of the whole child. So the idea of head, heart, and hands, or mind, body, spirit. Many pedagogies do head and hands. The heart part and the spirit part are really important to holistic educators. And they, speaking of taboo, Usually that's something we don't talk about in education, and especially public education as it approaches the domain of the public sphere and our fear of religiosity in any way. So, but noting the inherent spirituality of human beings and the idea that schools, like any place, can be ones that nurture and cultivate the human spirit, or more typically, they can be places that crush and stultify the human spirit. And so, holistic approaches to teaching and learning, generally speaking, are those that welcome the spirit. They include connecting young people and adults with the cosmos, connecting them with nature, connecting with place, connecting with self, connecting with spirit. So it's a pedagogy of connections. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I just want to further clarification because it's not something we really talk about.
Yeah.
And when well, I guess going based off the definition of holistic, it's not something that I witnessed in Busan Global Village when I was doing my internship there. I loved it. It was interesting, but I don't think we even, talked about, I guess, holistic while we was doing that. It was more, as you said, more hand and mind, physical and mental, and that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so Paul, kind of going back to your original question, you're kind of asking like how we saw holistic education being presented in those classrooms internationally. For myself in Ireland, so for me, what was really beautiful and also different to see is that their culture, their core, their everyday beliefs and systems and routines and lore and legend, everything associated in that is in the classroom. It's not separate. It's not, this is a place of academia. And it's something I find interesting and I see a lot more when I'm in countries that are a little more how's it, mono nationalist. Like it's, if there's a primary culture, there's a primary religion or primary beliefs, those are so deeply infused even into the schools. In the States, that can sometimes be a lot trickier because we are a melting pot. We are a salad bowl. Whatever your explanation for that is that there's so much, it's hard. You can't really just connect onto one and run with it. We try our best to try and dabble a little here, sprinkle a little there, without going too heavy into one, leaving out another, which sometimes, when we have such a diverse classroom of kids, makes it hard for kids to really dig into that sense of self, dig deep into that, know their place, know their purpose, be confident in questioning and wandering and exploring and discovering. And so I definitely think that we're trying to kind of round into that a little more in our education system, because we're seeing that and we're seeing that disconnect. And so especially trying to make more culturally inclusive classrooms. And so it's so interesting to see nations that are already there or that have the ability to do that, to just kind of hold on to one and be like, this is who we are. And it's so set into the curriculum that they get it everywhere. They get it at school, they get it at home, they get it out in town, wherever. And so that's one element of holistic, if you're looking at whole child, mind, body, soul, and connecting with that. That's one thing I noticed. And I actually brought out my journal from when I went to Ireland, and I had something written out about that I just kind of wanted to add to kind of give a perspective of how it's like different for me versus seeing it there was that I said, in the US, history, our very being and way of connecting to our past and ourselves is kept out of reach of us. Everything is kept behind glass, behind bars, behind ropes. Observation is prioritization over interaction. When the present is no longer able to engage with the past, it is when we lose, or that is when it loses life. Here in Ireland, we touch everything. We taste, we smell, and listen. And we observe not from a distance, but by what we are holding in our hands. I noticed a hesitancy for us students from the States when we were encouraged to engage with artifacts, with pieces, with history, with anything. There was a hesitancy because we're like, oh, should we be doing that? And they're like, this is how you learn. Like, this is how you need to be a part of this. You're a part of a legacy. So it's an ever living thing. So that was also another part of just holistic. I think of holistic, I think of hands-on and interactive. And so being able to interact so deeply with all that, where I go here to a museum and everything's behind glass. You know, everything is kept just out of reach. And there it was, everything was given to you. It was use your senses. What do you see? What do you taste? What do you feel? So yeah, that was something for me that I noticed there specifically.
That's great, Kelsey. Thank you. The when you talked about John Moriarty, that was I couldn't tell. Is that was a focus of your particular study, or that was an inspiration for the school you visit or the community you visited? I know a little bit about
Okay,
Moriarty's work.
great question. So that was our course, our class course was there to study John Moriarty's work. We went to the town of Dingle, which is kind of his final, like, several decades of life were spent there. A lot of his writings were there. And so we went to basically that place where he was inspired for all of these writings. And so we got to be in the land and see the things he was seeing that he was writing about, sit in the culture that he was a part of when he was writing these. And so we actually got to talk with a lot of people. He passed in 2007. We were able to speak with so many people who knew him personally. They have bookstores there full of his books. You know, he's a little like local icon there. And so we actually were able to schedule a meeting with his niece. And she came and talked with us about him, about his work, what he was like as a person, what he was like as a writer, and the impact that he just had on that community. And even when we went into Killarney, which was a couple hours away, bigger city, you'd still find his books in the stores and stuff. So he definitely has an impact, and I feel like has a good representation of deep-rooted Irish culture, but also trying to, as he says, take off your 19th century goggles. You know, we would say, you know, the 20th or 21st century goggles, and try to get back to that using your senses. A phrase that we came home with was conscious sensorial contact, and looking at how to apply that into education. So.
Yeah, I kind of know. I have a sense, I don't know if it's what you intended, but a sense of what you mean by in a setting like that, the kind of direct accessibility to both the place, the nature, the world around you in the ecological sense, but also like as if I can remember, the Moriarty talks a lot about myth, right, as the way back sort of to community and to getting right is through myth. And yeah, I mean, what's our story? What's our mythology as an American people? It does feel, as you said, the melting pot aspect is sort of, I mean, there are great opportunities for connection in the States too for that reason, but I also feel like it is often any deep connection to culture or history or ancestry or mythology or ecology is kind of lost because we are so transient and we are so, I don't know,
And in a
melting.
sense, young. Like if we think about
Yeah.
the United States as a nation in comparison to going over to Europe, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, like they do have deep roots. We're pretty baby in comparison.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about going back to your question, Paul. I didn't really notice much when I was in South Korea, but when I went to Roong Aroon, I noticed like they always had a reason why they did something. Like they can't do anything unless they have a reason. Like they're not allowed to teach it. And that's down to like the everyday, rather like I need for every day or to like I want like this box of pens. They can't do it unless they like can give a valid reason why, which I feel like is something that isn't always the case here in the States. And I really like something that I just found really interesting. And watching their lessons was like it was just mind boggling to sit there and like watch them. I remember one day they were doing I was with first graders and they were doing like a weather activity and they all like brought like their rain jackets and their raincoats and their rain boots and just all their rain gear and they went out and they just had a water balloon. Each kid had a water balloon and the goal was to pop it so like teachers were to pop them so that they would learn like that water like can get you wet. And it was just like I never thought of like holistic ed in that aspect until I was there, but to me that feels like holistic education, and that was just like really cool to like be able to see like like going out and using the resources that you have in the or the classroom rather than just like sitting down in the desks in the classroom and four walls and just like talking about it. Like that just opened my eyes a lot, and I can only imagine like what that did for the students. Like so many students were just like so upset because they got wet because they didn't have their rain gear, but then they like probably remembered that and was like, oh, that's why, because I didn't have my rain gear. But like so many other like kids, they were just having so much fun running around, and they were like, this is my balloon, and it was just such like a wonderful thing to just like observe.
Yeah, so here in Korea, when I was in a classroom, I didn't experience a lot of um, holistic learning just because my class was so fast and I was taking a Korean language course. So they were trying to get in as much basics as possible in the 3 to 4 weeks that I was in this class. Um, but in my own classroom, I've noticed in the Korean education system, it's a lot of, at least through elementary school, it's a lot of you sit down and you listen and you take notes and you learn. English is one of the few classes where you actually, there is a slightly more holistic approach. Um, I I work with a Korean English teacher, and so together we kind of try and make, our whole goal is to make English fun, make English something that our students want to continue learning. Um, and one of the first things that I kind of implemented in um, my classroom was make mistakes, just talk, make mistakes. Um, I'll make mistakes on purpose in front of my students so that they see that it's okay. If they ask me for spelling of a word and I'm not quite sure, I pull out my phone and type it in, just to like build up that it's okay, because a lot of the teachers in the Korean education system were taught very a lot of the current teachers were taught by people who lived through the Korean War. So they were taught this very like, you just listen and you don't make mistakes and you have to do everything perfectly. So um, part of the goal of bringing in the native English teachers is to show that it's okay to make mistakes. And especially when it comes to learning a foreign language that is so vastly different than your own. Um, Korean and English are two incredibly different languages, and I have they start learning English in the third grade, and so I come in and I'm talking all in English. I don't speak very much Korean in my classroom. I have a co-teacher that translates, but we do a lot of moving and counting and games that get my students involved and happy and um, willing to learn. I had students who, when I first got into the classroom, did not talk, refused to talk, would look at me like I was the scariest thing in the world when I would come up and talk to them, did not want to touch English with a 10-foot pole. And by the end of the year, they were talking, they were actually participating in the games more than just going through the motions because we had built this sort of connection um, just through the like patience and um, non-judgment that I implement into my classroom. And I taught third graders, so 10-year-olds all the way up to 13-year-olds. So it was a wide range of abilities and everything. And I made sure everybody knew that we're all in this together. And we're doing this to learn together. They teach me Korean and I teach them English. That's kind of like the little trade-off that we have in our classroom, and it's worked out great. And my students, some of them have told me that English is their favorite class this year. So, it's just we build these like very nice connections over simple things, musicals, all of that stuff, just to have that approach, even when we can't speak very much to each other.
And is this, Caitlyn, is this a state-run school? Is it private school?
I'm at a public elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
and my area, um, there it's a small village, so we have a poor population, so our students can't get access. A lot of our students can't get access to extra help outside of the classroom. So my students are actually lower level English learners compared to the areas around us, especially in Seoul. I'm one of the first foreigners that many of my students have ever seen, and I believe I am one of the first Caucasian people that they've seen. It was a lot of staring from everyone in my village for the first about month I was there. But yeah, it's a publicly run school.
It sounds like, and of course, I don't know all the nuances and details, but the sounds like you have a fair amount of freedom and room for creativity to design your activities, curriculum, ways you'll interact with kids, and what you expect of them. And I wonder,
Yeah.
is that would you say that's typical, or is that unique because of the English language subject matter, or?
So it's from my understanding, it's pretty unique within the native English teaching, especially this EPIK program. I have many friends who are teachers across Korea and the native English teaching role. I am one of the very few that I know. I create my own lessons. I work with my main co-teacher, and then I work with all of the homeroom teachers as well. I teach at least one day a week in their classrooms, and I teach one day a week with my co-teacher. So I make my lesson plans, I make my PowerPoints. I have a textbook that I have to keep up with the syllabus because they're required to finish the textbook by the end of the year. But other than that, I pretty much have free reign. Um, I played Kahoot with my sixth graders to review at the end of the year. I've done English Olympics where we had little like relays. I do get a lot of freedom, but that's very unusual. I have friends that are very strict and they are just to stand there and repeat. I have some people that they just make games to play for the English reviews. I have friends that they teach some of the lesson, but not all of it. Um, it really just depends on the school and the co-teachers. My first day, I had a tour and they handed me all the textbooks and said, please just make English fun for these kids. And just kind of sent me on my way and said, send us the lesson plan, send us your PowerPoint, and will help you in the classroom. I'm in a very unique situation.
Caitlin, can I ask about the EPIK program itself? I've done research in the past and have looked into EPIK as a form of teaching ESL, and some people review it very highly. Some people are like, not so much, and sometimes it kind of I feel like whittles down to just like a personality choice of whether you feel like you fit in to their format or not. Do you have any experience teaching abroad outside of using EPIK, or would you recommend EPIK, or just kind of explain that platform a little bit?
Yeah. So EPIK is a government-run program in Korea. I also did some research. The two main ways to teach in Korea is through EPIK or a direct hire by a school, or through a hagwon, which is like an after-school academy private classroom sort of thing. Um, the reason I chose EPIK was because their benefits of being a teacher are better than hagwons. I get almost a month of vacation time, which is pretty good here in Korea with the working culture. Whereas at a hagwon, you might get 7 to 9 days. I also get housing stipend, so I get housing provided by my school. All I have to pay are my bills. Um, the one thing with EPIK, the major con that I view is that you don't get to choose where you go. That's the biggest thing that you have to give up. I didn't know my providence until about a month before I left so that I could get my visa. I didn't know my school until the last night of my week-long orientation. So if you are one of those people where you kind of want to be in a specific spot like Seoul or Busan, Daegu, one of the cities, hagwons are probably your best option. Where if you're kind of like me and you're like, as long as I'm near a place that I can go without a car, I'm okay. Um, so that's kind of the big thing that you have to kind of play with is you get more vacation time, you get more benefits. I also have a direct supervisor at the Office of Education of Gyeonggi-do, where if I have an issue with my school that they are not handling and I've gone up the correct steps and procedure, he will step in and kind of be my advocate or try to figure out what's going on. Where at a hagwon, it's basically you and your academy. So it's really just weighing the pros and cons of having that control of where you get to end up, and if you're okay only having about a week of vacation a year. You get paid a little bit more at hagwons, but to me the pay wasn't worth it to not have the freedom of more vacation. Granted, my school gets to tell me that I can only take it during the school holidays and the breaks, those school breaks, but it's about 3 months. I have about a month in the summer and then 2 months in the winter. So I take it, and then the rest of the time I desk warm, and it's not terrible. You just kind of sit in your office all summer. I took naps and watched Netflix. Um, you teach an English camp in the summer and the winter for about a week, and me and my students had a ton of fun. We always have a ton of fun with it. We play a lot of games. We do a lot of different activities. Where at a hagwon, you're just kind of teaching curriculum the whole time. There's not as much fun in it, um, to me personally.
Um, I also have a question about EPIK. You were saying that you get more benefits and like more like vacation stuff. Um, are you there for like a set amount of time, like 2 years, and then you have to like reapply, or is it just like whenever you want to like stop, then you just let them know?
Yeah, so each contract is a year. Your first contract is a year. So I came in April, so my first contract is up in April. After that, your contract goes until you start in February, which is the beginning of the school year here. They do a calendar year school system. So my next contract will be about 9, 10 months. And then after that, if I continue to renew with my school, it'll be that year long, February to February. You can reapply if you want to go somewhere else. Some providences, you can transfer within the province. You can apply to do that. Gyeonggi-do, you can't, which is kind of a bummer. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll stay at their current school for 1 or 2 years and then reapply through EPIK to go into Seoul. That's very common. But basically, my renewal with my school, they said, "Do you want to keep teaching here, or are you going home?" And I said, "I would like to keep teaching here." And they said, "Cool, here's a paper, sign it, and we'll send it off to the Office of Education to get your next contract." Some schools, due to budget or there, as you probably know, there's the declining birth rate in Korea. A lot of schools are losing students. So they cut back on programs, and one of them is EPIK. So sometimes schools say, hey, next year we're not doing our EPIK program. If you want to stay, you have to reapply. Your application is looked at a little bit harsher if you reapply through EPIK, just because you have been teaching in Korea through the program. But it's fairly simple reapplying every year. If something happens where you do have to break your contract, because life happens, they understand that. You're able to, you just don't get as many, you don't get any of the exit allowances that you would get if you completed your contract. And you might have issues in the next couple years with if you want to go back to South Korea to work, which is fairly common for breaking a contract internationally. So it's a year contract, which seems like a long time, but it's flown by for me. I felt like I just got here like 2 months ago, and now it's already almost been a year. So
I guess I kind of have a question, just throwing out to anyone. It's very similar, actually, Luna, to one that you have prompted here for us. But with our experiences, either as students studying abroad or as teachers teaching abroad, or for those who are just world travelers in general, what, if anything, do you feel that there is something that you fundamentally brought back with you that has impacted either your day-to-day life personally or your day-to-day professionally, like in your classroom, in your education, in your job? Is there something about that travel? Because obviously, like, you go, you'll have all these great memories, some like really highs, some really lows, but is there anything fundamentally that you're like, I have to hold on to this, absorb this, take it back, and integrate that back out into what I am doing as a teacher, a student, or just person?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little. For me, when I went to Thailand and was in Roong Aroon, I was only in the classroom for about a week, and the rest of the time was more like getting settled, leaving, cultural things. We did a lot of cultural things, such as going out, trying different food, going to the gardens. We went to the mangroves. We had a beautiful discussion with a monk, which was a wonderful opportunity. We went like shopping at local places. Um, but something that really has stayed with me over the years since coming back is my last day with the students. Is I had come back, there was a little cafe, like about 5 minute walk one way, and I went there while they were like on during recess or something, and I came back, and one of the students had came running up to me, and they had actually went into another classmate that was with me in a different class, that in the same like hall that they were in, and they were like, "Oh, where's Teacher Luna? Where's Teacher Luna?" And they were like, "I don't know, like she'll be back." And he came running out and he gave me a card that said, "Thank you for loving me, Teacher Luna." And that like really stayed with me, and I was like, okay. And he was one of the kids, he was like very touchy, like during there, he always wanted to be around somebody. You could tell he wanted attention, and he was like lacking probably some attention. Um and he definitely could be seen as like a behavior child, like someone who was like more like acting up. But to me, it was just he wanted attention. He wanted somebody to like see him, and to be able to get that, I was like, oh, I made so like I was only here for a week, maybe a week and a half, and I made this huge impact on like this one kid, and that was all always just stuck with me, and I honestly like don't think that my beliefs as like a teacher would be the same if I didn't go to Roong Aroon. I feel like it shaped me very much, and I feel like it just solidified that I do want to use holistic practices in the classroom. And yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good question, Kelsey. Thanks. I really appreciate it. The I think, I mean, my travel experiences partly taught me how to be a traveler, you know, how to travel well and listen deeply and be fully present. I was using a research methodology called portraiture, which demanded my full presence and deep listening. But also it was being so out of my comfort zone and so out of familiarity and so out of, people who spoke my language and had my same cultural references and so on. It really puts you in a different frame of mind, which I think I've retained some of. But I tell you, for me, I guess I would say of the schools I visited, the one I'm thinking of right now that was really a game changer in terms of my outlook was a school on the Navajo reservation outside Flagstaff. And so I've really tried in my last 25 years of my profession to think about the child in front of me. And the question, the most important pedagogical question for me has been, what does this child need right now from me? And that's a profoundly different question than most educators are asking themselves in a moment-to-moment basis when they're teaching algebra or whatever. And for me, that's like, oh, that was my sort of guiding light. But this school in Flagstaff, outside Flagstaff, is called, it's a charter school, public charter school. It's called the STAR School, which stands for Service to All Relations. And the overwhelming concept, the charter of the school, is to think about our learning not about what does this child need, but what does this mountain need? What does this ant need? All our relations, living and non-living. And I do think, though I slip into, Western colonial ways of thinking easily, as it's so reinforced everywhere we go, I do think sometimes I'm able to reframe the question I'm asking as an educator. What does this place need? What does the cosmos need? What does humanity need and non-humanity? So yeah, I think I brought that back.
For me, before I came to study in Korea, I had traveled a lot of Europe. Korea was country number 10 for me to visit outside of the US. And so um, I have always kind of had this mindset traveling that, like, I'm going into somebody else's territory. Um, I am going to just kind of watch, observe, and just embrace um, what's going on around me. That being said, I always do a ton of research before. I've While living here in Korea, I've also had the opportunity to go to Thailand and Japan. Before both of those, I hop on my dear old friend Instagram and just look up what other people who have traveled, like what they recommend and that sort of thing. So as a traveler, I view it as a challenge of getting to know a totally new way of life. Um, as somebody who grew up in the Western culture and now is in uh, South Korea, which is based off of a lot of more so Confucianist values. That's where a lot of the um, traditions and things lie, especially when it comes to age hierarchy. It makes it a little more challenging because I have coworkers. I'm the youngest, and so I have some coworkers that they just don't even talk to me because they are 20 plus years older than me and they can't be bothered. Um, but I view it as a way of just like this is a new culture. I'm going to accept it, but I'm not going to also get rid of my core identity. A lot of what my students love to learn from me is about where I'm from. I have one student, she loves Broadway musicals. And so she she ran up to me one day during lunch, and I can just picture her face. And she goes, "Teacher, do you know Kinky Boo?" And I was like, "I do, but why do you? You're a fourth grader." We talked about the Wicked movie. I have some sixth grade girls who love K-pop, and as my students get older, I use more K-pop references with them. We were learning directions, and there's a really popular song by a very popular K-pop group in Korea called Left and Right. And so I told them, you can learn English through Korean music, through those English lyrics, left and right. They talk about it. And one girl, she thought I was the coolest person ever for referencing her favorite group. Uh, and so they also we had a full talk about restaurants and the difference in restaurants, and uh, I try to bring the difference in culture in as a way for them to embrace it because so many of my students haven't ever traveled outside of Korea because their families just can't afford it. They're lucky if they can go to Busan for the holiday. um, so it's I've just I've really learned to appreciate and to blend cultures. I've also, since being a teacher here, have learned to just embrace the small little things and just enjoy the little things in life. My students, you would think that I'm a celebrity. They see me walking through the equivalent of a Dollar Tree here. Teacher, hi teacher. Just they're so excited to see me, and I'm just so excited to see them as well. And when they see me around town or even in the city nearby, it's a little like, oh, because now I have to be on my best behavior as a role model. But it's still just great to see them and see how happy that they are. Just a little thing like seeing me or being on the same bus as me can make me.
Tamara, we haven't heard your voice yet, and I want to pass the ball your way.
Well, just so many things. I guess thinking about Kelsey's question and also Caitlyn's response, I started my name is Tamara Wyatt, pronouns are she and her. I started my overseas journey in July of 1990. So I was overseas for 8 years, came back to the States for 6 years to get my master's degree, and then came back overseas, and I've been overseas ever since with very few home visits. So, I started off in Taiwan. Caitlyn, your experience and your freedom resonated with me. I would walk in Monday morning, be handed 11 flashcards, and I would have to build an entire day, well, an entire week with a full day for kindergarten students around these 11 flashcards. So it was a lot of freedom. They would never give them to me on Friday afternoon. It was always Monday morning. I don't know. Anyway, I think for me, thinking about what living, teaching overseas has brought me was the constant confrontation of self in a different context. And when I went back to because you have to understand, I thought I was going for 6 months to Taiwan. I was pre-internet. I never researched anywhere. So it was just kind of like, woohoo, I'm just going to go and experience what there is to experience and just go with it. Because I didn't really have any frame of reference, but I went for 6 months and ended up staying in Taiwan for 4 years. And then moved to Thailand under some very distressing circumstances. And then in 1998, my family, my husband and I made the decision to go back to the States for what we thought was maybe a 2 or 3 year working holiday, so I could see my family all around the US. And that was where I had my first realization of the extent that my life in Asia, how much it had changed me fundamentally. I had always been very confident, very brash, very not aggressive, but I was very aware of who I was and very self motivating. And I could not manage interviews when I came back to the States, because in Asia, you are not self-aggrandizing. You do not toot your own horn. You are very, especially in the 90s as a woman, as a young woman in Taiwan, in a very Chinese, traditional Chinese culture. So it took me a while to readjust to the States. I no longer was in sync with that culture and with that way that you present yourself. And so for those 8 years of my early adult life, where most people are navigating career fields, I had been in a completely different situation. And so that was the first thing I guess I noticed was, I don't know if I recognize it as a loss of self or a shift of self, but I had to reintegrate pieces of myself to make a new Tamara. Like I had to shift from Jiang Feng to Tamara and really understand what that meant. And I think that searching for self and understanding of self and recognizing that I kind of could go above and see myself in a situation and kind of like a movie and like, wow. Oh, that's interesting. So I think when I was working in the States during those 6 years, especially when I was in New York, I was in New York during 9/11 and working with my students and seeing that shift of like, how am I supposed to feel in this context that is so completely shocking and disorienting and disheartening and horrible. I felt that was something I could at least meet, as Paul said, like see the student in front of me. What does this person need right now? It's obviously not, understanding fractions. We need to talk about where am I and this has happened and where am I going from now in forward. So that was something, I think the experience, of having been overseas and seeing how much I had changed and was different and having to reintegrate myself in a different context. I think that was something I brought back. On the flip side, coming back to Asia, bringing back a much stronger sense of self and ability to kind of have some anchor within me. So that even though I still, Singapore, Thailand, I was part of the original Roong Aroon development team in 94 to 96. And then I also set up the international program, and so you have to shift, you have to be aware of the context you're in, but somewhere inside you, you also have to have yourself. And I think now when I'm working with students in these different school contexts, it's really about helping them bring out or see that self. Like I can't tell them what that self is. I can't make it for them. But I have to give them the opportunities and the venue and the the space to be themselves and to explore themselves. Because I especially work with middle schoolers, that's sort of my niche. And every year they're different people, you know, as they're growing. And so I think for me, that understanding of self and how it changes, and it's okay, but we have to reintegrate, we have to find our anchor, but we also have to be able to shift the anchor too, right? You know, we grow. I'm 57 now, so you know my anchor's in a different place than it used to be, and that has to be okay. And I guess, you know, kind of being able to watch my students, observe my students, and allow my students that chance to see and grow themselves. I think that's really, for me, the biggest thing that I can recognize from being abroad and then going home and then coming back. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tamara. Someone who's been abroad for as long as you have, I knew you would have some good thoughts. So thank you. We are at our time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I did notice Paul mentioned that, Christopher, maybe you have some wisdom on Danish folk schools. We might have to have a whole nother discussion and invite you back, because I would absolutely like to hear about that. If that's something you're willing to do, but we can talk more about that maybe through email or something. But Kelsie and Luna and Caitlyn and Cassie, thank you so much. But yeah, it's a nice opportunity to have all of you share about your experiences and remind some of us who've been abroad before to bring that spirit back with us. There's a lot to be learned from the experience of being overseas. So yeah, thank you all. And I think now you're all on the email list, but please join us every other Monday. We have different facilitators, from students to professors to those overseas, those in the US, all over the world. And we have a really wonderful community of humans doing great work and sharing through these discussions. So yeah, I'd love to see you all again soon. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.